Please help me welcome to the stage Dr. Abdul El-Sayed.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. That was pretty good. Oklahoma State won today, huh? Or we got Sooners in the room. So I happened to meet. Central Oklahoma. All right, I've walked into territory. I'm just going to walk right back. I met the mayor earlier today, Mayor Davis. Can we get him a round of applause, please? Thank you for being here, Mr. Mayor. And I was all set, super excited to meet the mayor, and then he told me he's from Ohio. I'm from Michigan. And if there's proof that people can come together beyond their differences, it's that we had a lovely conversation. If we can today, I just want one more round of applause for the incredible staff of CAIR Oklahoma who put this all together. Another round for their leader, Brother Adam Sultani, who basically gave my speech today. With, might I add, much cooler footwear than mine. I also just want to acknowledge the incredible wait staff who took care of us here today. If we can get a round of applause for them. I was reflecting a bit about what I would share, what it was that I could even bring to you tonight to put the work that is being done here in context. I flew 2 flights today to get here, one to Atlanta from Detroit, and then one from Atlanta to Oklahoma City. And I thought, that's a really long trip. But I want to put that trip in context. Because the most famous trip out to Oklahoma was one that was forced by a genocidal law in 1830, the Indian Removal Act, that forced members of 5 Native American tribes to leave their native homelands to come to what ultimately became Oklahoma. It was called the Trail of Tears. 60,000 people were displaced. Tens of thousands of them died on the journey. Not 70 miles away from here in 1921, not even a century later, there was a brutal massacre of the Greenwood neighborhood in Tulsa. Hundreds were killed when the city of Tulsa deputized what they knew was a white supremacist gang who flew airplanes over top what they called then Black Wall Street. They killed dozens of people, innocent children, women, and men. And they destroyed millions of dollars in wealth. Oklahoma City, I drove by it on my way here. And in 1995, an anti-government white supremacist exploded the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. I'm sure some of you were here when it happened, can remember the blast, and remember who they picked up afterwards, people who look like many of the people in this room, speak the same native languages. Many in the community were harassed because media swooping in to cover the Oklahoma City bombing blamed it on Arabs and Muslims. Now, I had planned to keep that to be the history that I would cover as we talk about our future. But I was reminded, actually, about events that I remember because I was an adult when they happened. And that was question 755. When the state of Oklahoma voted in a referendum to amend the Constitution to ban Sharia law. What does that mean? I don't know. And yet the voters banned it anyway. What I offer today is just a reflection on the American history that runs through this state. You all sitting in this room in this town. We're sitting in a space, in a time, when I don't have to tell you that the same exact forces that drove native peoples from their land 2 centuries ago, destroyed Black Wall Street a century ago, bombed a building decades ago, and tried to ban Sharia law not a decade ago, that those forces are alive and well today. We see it in conversations across our country. People who fear what offering basic access to the ballot, a democratic tradition in this country, might mean for their sense of power, and so have turned their backs on democracy to begin with. We see it in discussions that tell us that we cannot talk about the history of racism that I just mentioned. We can't mention those things. They're too divisive, let alone the attitudes that created them in the first place. They tell us that we can't look back, we just have to look forward, because they want us to forget everything that came before. It's tempting in a moment like this to believe that the worst is behind us. And look, I want to bring a message of hope, and inshallah I will. But it's tempting to believe that those things are in the past. But they say those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. Tonight we're here to support an organization dedicated to the civil liberties and civil rights of Muslim Americans. But I want to press you. I want to press us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran Kareem, He tells us, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who believe, kunu qawwamina billah, shuhada'i lil qist, ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. O you who believe, stand firm with God. Be witnesses to justice. And do not allow the hatred that other people have for you to keep you from doing justice. Do justice. That is closest to consciousness of God. It's easy when we reflect on our own history as a small community brought together across ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, to assume that justice is just us. And the reason I wanted to go all the way back to the 1830s is because you can't understand a Sharia ban without understanding the Trail of Tears. You can't understand the efforts to uproot Muslim Americans without understanding the Tulsa Massacre. You cannot understand the challenges we face today without understanding white supremacy. We have to set it in the context of our history. But here's the thing. The beautiful thing about our opportunity today is that we have a choice in front of us about what we do next. I started my career in government service as a health commissioner. I was appointed to rebuild a health department that had been shut down when the state put our city into bankruptcy. They shut down a 185-year-old health department in a city where our children face a higher infant mortality rate than my father's native Egypt. Threefold the probability of asthma hospitalization, fourfold the probability of lead exposure. We look at those statistics and we bake them in as normal. But what we forget sometimes is that history has a way of compounding. It has a way of manifesting itself on the lived experiences of real people in ways that they cannot tie directly backward. We're told not to look back because then we can consider all of the consequences of history as just part of normal. It's just how it is. But we have a choice about what we do about it. As we reflect here today about the future of the Muslim community, about what it means to achieve and pursue civil liberties and civil rights, It is critical that our community, that we stand up and we be witnesses for justice. And as I look across here, I see people who are doing that work every single day. Working as lawyers in what we know to be an unfair system, trying to bend it just a little bit more for justice. Working as doctors, serving people who are indigent because our healthcare system has forgotten about people who don't have the money to buy themselves a ticket in. Working in organizations to build the future of technology, to empower more people to have access to one another. Building business and business opportunities so that folks can get a leg up. Building jobs that create the future of our economy. What I ask you here and now today is that as you think about your work, ask yourself, what is the change that I can make? What is the step that I can take to acknowledge the consequences of history, to bend a future so that we and I and our community can be witnesses for justice? We live in a society where the consequences of racism, the consequences of xenophobia have left their mark on people. But I want to reflect just for a second on the other parts of that ayah. وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. Do not allow the hatred that other people may have for you or the hatred you may feel to keep you from doing justice. There's a story we tell ourselves sometimes that the consequences of racism are limited to the people against whom racism is worst. I want to tell you something. Racism hurts everybody. When a community decides they don't want to extend health care for their poorest, you know who's most likely not to get health care? Low-income white people. When we build an economy that neglects lowest income, predominantly black schools, you know who suffers? Everybody, because their schools get underfunded too. And so, as we step into this work, as we embrace our responsibility to be witnesses for justice, I hope that we do it with a bit of empathy. A recognition that engaging people where they are, seeing them for who they are, putting ourselves in their shoes, even if they may hate us, finding the love in our heart for them, that's the work. That's what that means. I want to finish on a note. We have a critical election coming up. You've already heard that you got to register to vote twice already. So I'm going to be the third. Y'all, we're voting on November 8th. As someone who ran for office, I can tell you every vote matters. Especially in deep red communities like this one. Because I'll tell you something. The investment that is made in our democracy by anyone engaging is a reflection of the degree to which an election is competitive. Now, I'm not telling you what degree to vote, because I know that CAIR is a 501c3 organization. Adam. But I am telling you that when we show up, we make sure people recognize that even Oklahoma can be a battleground. It encourages people to step up and run. Maybe people in this room. So if you do not have a plan to vote, please make your plan to vote right now. There's something odd about our Constitution. Does anybody know what the first 7 words of the Constitution of the United States are? What's the first 3 words? We the people. And what's the rest? In order to form a more perfect union. You guys got to forgive me. I'm a scientist. So the idea of being more than perfect doesn't make sense to me. I never understood it. Perfect is an absolute state. It is either perfect or it's not. So how do you be more perfect? And what I find so inspiring about those words is the recognition that the work of perfecting lies in the first 3 words. We, the people. Because every time somebody tries to divide us, tells us that this group or that group does not belong because of the color of their skin, because of how they pray, because of where they come from, because of what language they spoke first, that's antithetical to what it means to be American. But the work of perfecting is in deciding that we are going to show up with and for each other. The work of perfecting is about sewing together. After all, in Latin, the ideals of our country are founded in these three words, e pluribus unum, out of many one. In showing up here today, you have made a commitment to the civil rights and civil liberties of our community. But that's not enough. Every day in the work that you do, remember the shoulders on which you stand, the history that runs through this place, and decide that you're going to be intentional about leveraging your positionality, your space, to make out of many one. To serve folks who suffer on the wrong end of compounded injustice. That in and of itself answers the question that anybody might ask about whether or not we belong here, about whether or not we have fealty to these United States of America. Because if we decide to show up, we bring our whole selves, we do the work of service, we invest in one another, we build those relationships, all we're doing is reifying those first three words, we the people. We're making a more perfect union. That's the work you've decided to step into here today. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to join you. Jazakumullahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.